I do like us, exploring this understanding of what it means to be culturally responsible. So that's why we started this program as we create. It's an acronym for culturally responsible, right? Economic and technical empowerment.
So about the book and about the author, Bobby Herrera is the co-founder and president of Populous Group. Populous Group is a contract management company. And he also grew up in a big family with parents who immigrated to America. So he is a minority and his business is minority owned. While, the migration story isn't an uncommon thing, his leadership style and company culture is inspired by his story with growing up as a minority and getting to where he was. So the belief that everyone deserves the opportunity to succeed is at the core of his philosophy, his business, and in his life. Another fun fact was that he was a proud Army vet and currently lives in Port Oregon. But I thought that, reading a book about leadership, especially from a minority standpoint, was actually really interesting. So discussion begins. Did you enjoy reading this book?
I'll start it off. I love this opening question because it's like we could go anywhere. I did enjoy the book. It was short, which, that's always great. You can get through it quickly.
Right.
However, there were parts of it that felt a little self-indulgent to me. And by that, I mean, do we really need to know this? It felt like in some places there was extra detail and a little bit of self-inflation that took away from his main messages. That's my tilt.
What were your biggest takeaways from the book?
Yeah, for me, I'd say two takeaways. One was it was pretty a common theme throughout the book for him to continually be applying what he was getting from his mentors, what he was reading, anything that he was any I guess input that he was getting, he tried to actively apply it, or at least was transparent about when he did it and how it kind of backfired on him. And then the other takeaway was being humble enough to kind of redo some of the methods or practices that he had, just being humble enough to constantly go back to the drawing board and figure out why isn't this working the way that he thought it was going to work.
Hey, I kind of like the statement of choosing your impact. And I think there was a point that he made about, and I apologize if it was specific to managers or was specific to just people, professionals, that, they have so many different priorities. So that it makes it easier if you choose and focus on one priority in order to make your biggest impact.
Okay.
Yeah, and it may have been in that same context that you're highlighting, Tiffany, I believe it was, but he made this comment about wanting more for your people than from your people, which when I got to that part, it caused me to just stop and think about how to ensure that I'm doing that more often.
What role does character and principles play in leadership?
I'll volunteer. And I'm actually going to use my husband. He's an executive, and I look up to him because I think he's a great leader because he maintains his values. I call him a preacher leader because he has very strict values that everyone he comes across knows that he will apply. And because of that, people can expect his behavior or expect his reaction because he's so consistent. And so one, his reputation is established, and two, his consistency garners respect. I also work in the same place, garners respect from others. And I think character and principles are very important.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's everything. Leadership, I guess I would also say it's just being an example. And with this kind of question, it makes me think about culture again, because it's the principles are embedded in the culture, and hopefully they're helping develop character for the people that are coming up in the culture. His dad, he's talked about how he's like, you never break your word and you never show fear, So it's they had a culture, they have principles. And again, kind of just take my biggest takeaway of the book, I don't know if a lot of people that are in leadership positions really make it a point to have principles that they can be consistent on to make them respectable.
I would say that's where transparency comes into play, as you said, because the more transparent you are, I mean, it builds trust because people can see and identify with those possible personal struggles, even though, because we're all human at the end of the day and we're not perfect, right? So if you can be transparent as a leader and say, hey, this is the message that I got for everybody, but these are the things that I'm dealing with right now. You guys might not agree with them, but this is the current state that I have. I mean, y'all don't, sometimes people don't have to go in full detail about what they're going through, but at least to be transparent enough to tell people like, these are things that might have you looking at me differently. We can either come to an agreement to agree to disagree, or, we can have a conversation about your thoughts about it. And that's where you open that conversation to build that trust, to build that respect between the people. The more camaraderie that we build with people, the more respect we have, and the more they can still understand our message despite those issues.
That we as Black professionals, engineers or otherwise, have so much more baggage to carry as leaders, that I think it actually, I mean, the upside of it is that it allows us to, in most cases, display even more grace in conflict and project even more authenticity, in the face of whatever we may be encountering. It's just that's our struggle, which turns into a gift when we are in leadership roles.
This discussion is right on time for me because I'm right in the middle of shaping out new leadership competencies for my organization. So we're having conversations with, our senior leaders and helping them to define, what the culture, what type of leadership skills are required, within the culture and to drive the strategy. And so, we had a leader that, stepped up and said, hey, in this area, I made a mistake. I'm throwing, myself under the bus. I'm holding myself accountable. And it's interesting that you say that, Daria, because as Black Americans, you always wonder like, yeah, that was really great. That was really authentic. Could he have gotten away with that if he were Black? Could he have gotten away with that if that was one of us? Probably would have had to message that differently, right? Probably authenticity looks very different. And so when we talk about inclusive leadership, it's definitely something that we've got to consider too is, yes, authentic leadership and, what does that mean? But also, when you're a leader of color, what does that mean as well?
So what value does the author think tough decisions provide for leaders?
So I think something else that it taps into is just so what I call it is courageous conversations, right? It's kind of the same thing as having tough discussions with people, but it's almost like that elephant in the room that everyone sees is there, but no one wants to talk about it. So just laying it out on the table, almost one would think as a human that, oh, okay, this is going to make everything super awkward. But a lot of times when those discussions are had, the tension immediately goes away because you're no longer assuming or trying to read someone else's mind or trying to make assumptions on how someone's thinking. You all are just talking about it out loud. So I think that in itself is just a huge value for any leader to be able to have those courageous conversations with their group so that there aren't any questions, there aren't any misunderstandings. A lot of times miscommunication happens because there is no communication. So I think that is a huge value to having those tough discussions or courageous conversations. So, yeah.
So this is actually one of my favorite questions. Why does the author state that the best compliment of a leader is to be told you are wrong?
Yeah, I was just going to say, when I look at this question, I mean, it really reminds me of something our CEO said, when I asked the team, how should leaders act within the organization? And one of the first things that he said was, humility. And so when I look at this question, it feels like, if you're a leader and if you are willing to invite that conversation, then there's a degree of humility about you. that is definitely something that can be respected and admired. So
I think that I like the term that Daria shared earlier, the brave space. I think that if you're a leader that's told that you're wrong, it's like evidence that you've successfully created a space where the people that you're leading feel like they can be honest with you. And I think that that's like a testament to like the structure and like the culture of the organization. And then I think another thing is that it means that like the team has bought into the why and that they actually care enough to like make that why or like to achieve that goal, versus just saying, yeah, whatever you say, like I don't really care one way or the other. So I think that that's like a good thing.
Have you ever been in a position within leadership where you had to reevaluate your strategy and self-evaluate your leadership approach before revisiting the situation? What did you learn in that moment?
I've noticed that you have to change your message to fit the audience if you want a result. I didn't have the opportunity to be a leader, but I have two very different children. And if I wanted a result, I had to make sure that I catered the message to meet them on their level if I wanted to get what I wanted out of them. And then many years later, I had an opportunity to be in a leadership position, and I had to do the same thing. One employee may be able to handle the direction or the vision one way, other ones may not. And then what do? You either fight them and not get anything out of them, or you figure out how to revisit and come back and reach them in a way that will help you reach your goal.
The professional regional standpoint, I think something that we as a board do well is have those let's air the room conversations. It's not necessarily a brave or a courageous conversation, but more like if there's anything that you might not be feeling, just let us know. Caught up on the business side and making sure that deadlines get met, but people exhaust and people end up running out of steam or running out of gas. So having those moments, not like the entire meeting, but having those moments when you are all together to just do that, hey, how are you doing? Those mental checks, and making sure that the people on your team are doing okay. That is an effective leadership strategy.
How did reading The Gift of Struggle influence your understanding of what it means to be a culturally responsible Black engineer? Based on the conversation that we had, how does this better help your understanding of what it is?
To me, being culturally responsible isn't just about my culture. And it's not just about me or having people who look like me move forward, because my workplace will never look like me exclusively. So being culturally responsible also means being aware of, if I want people to look at me a certain way, I have to treat them the same way. And if I don't understand my background or someone else's background, just have a small awareness of someone else's background, then someone won't give me that same consideration either. And number two, I need to understand culture, which means I need to be cognizant. And one way to do that is to read.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so it just makes me have to try to define what culture is. And I mean, my understanding of it is like evolving, because I mean, culture, like Tima was saying, it doesn't have to be your culture to be responsible to it, right? Culture is almost like when you walk into somebody else's space, just respecting it, and culture is like the vehicle for like, values and principles, points of view, perspectives, all legit human experiences. So it's just being respectful of that stuff and just, understanding what is valued, making sure you show that.
Should more NSBE members read this book? If so, what would they get from it?
I mean, I don't know, the book, maybe not, but the discussion, yes. Being able to have this experience and hear these different perspectives, I guess, like Nadia's saying, like people that really have the experience from it, and even like Daria's saying, like people that have a different perspective of it, it all matters, and it helps us all grow together. So